What is going on, everybody, and welcome back to Master Crafted. We are here with another installment of Turn Zero Tactics. We wanna just keep on the priority train. We almost got through Taken Hold, but we feel like there's more pressing matters, right, Phil? We want to talk about some things people are seeing far more frequently. So, what's the topic today?
Yeah, so we're going to talk about the matchup for priority assets in the Purge the Foe. Something that I have a lot of familiarity with, and something that there's going to be a lot of players that are going to see often. So it's definitely an interesting matchup because it does tend to some very specific list building decisions on both sides. So once again, Lane and I, we will take both sides of this matchup. Lane will take the priority asset side. I'll take the Purge the Foe side, and we'll go over it. So just as a reminder, if you want a reminder of what these missions are, strongly recommend you go watch our other video where we break down every single matchup. But here we'll just give you a little bit of a reminder. Purge is Destroyer's Wrath, where you just got to kill one or more enemy units, and then you get points at the end of your command phase for controlling one objective or more, and then you control more objectives than your opponent, and none of those obviously count for your home, except for the control more. It does count, including your home. And then the second battle round onwards, if you kill more units than you lost the previous turn, then you would get an additional 4 points. And then on the Vital Link side, this is an action secondary. So it's control one or more central objectives. And then for each of your operation markers within range of one of those objectives, you get an additional VP. You do have to control the objective to get that, but those Vital Link actions do stack. So you could get 5 tokens on there in a game and get some nice extra pennies for points. And then control one or more objectives, very similar, not counting your home. And then one or more objectives is a central objective that you control. So it's very easy to get that 8 points turn 2 onwards. And then you get 10 points at the end of the battle if you manage to control your opponent's home. This action is very straightforward. You can only do it once per turn. You do have to control it after you complete the action. It has to be on a central objective. So a lot of these, all of these right now are split objectives. So now priority assets did get a little bit of a benefit in the change to the layout. So there is some value. So yeah, let's get right into it.
Yeah. So when we are looking at the first of the maps, Dawn of War, it's everywhere now, and we don't love it. But when we're talking about the priority asset side, right, you got to be doing those actions as early as possible because that additional math just adds up so much throughout the game, right? If you don't do it turn one, that means that you are behind that 1 point every single turn. So making sure you get those cumulative points every single round, like that's actually the bread and butter of this mission as the priority assets player. So you've got to make sure that you at least are setting up yourself to A, be able to always do the action, but B, always make sure you can control that objective that you're going to be doing the action on. There is something to be said about being flexible to doing it one or the, but in general, you're probably going to pick one because if you can just kind of hold down that side of the board, it's probably going to work out better for you because you're really hoping to eventually, at least once or twice throughout the game, try to get the not only hold an objective, but make sure one of the ones you are holding is a central objective. That way, you are getting that nice 8 points instead of the 4 points for your hold one. So definitely trying to do that. And then as we are looking at the math, right, on where our baseline is, we'll say that you're always able to either hold your natural or one in the middle. But in general, worst case scenario, you hold your natural. That's 16 points there. And then if you do get your action done and you control the center that you do the action on every single turn, that's going to be 10 points from just the 2 from holding a central. And then it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 for a total of 15 points in total from those actions, right? If you don't do the first one, you miss out on that 5. You just get the 1, 2, 3, and 4. That's why it's so important to do that every single round. So that brings our total up with the 16, the 10, and the 15 to should be 41. So if you ever can hold the central one time, you should max primary, or eventually if you just take your opponent's home, right? Like it's a very, very low floor for being able to do this, and you really want to make sure you can. Now, knowing that though, right, we know our floor is super, super high. As long as you got it done early, right, maybe turn 4 or turn 5, you aren't able to do the central thing, but you know you can maybe still just hold the center, right? So you're trading out 4 points for a hold for 4 points at the end, but you don't know that at the beginning of the game. That's why early, got to be doing that action. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So on the priority side, on this layout here, you obviously have a very good position in your deployment zone, whether it be a unit here that can come out and touch, right? We're within 6 inches here. So that means the majority of your basic movement can get out and touch this piece of terrain, do the action. I could say the same thing here of running units touching this to maintain hidden, or even putting it on the backside and then running it along here. And now they have hidden and go to ground and very easily can come up with the majority of infantry assets up here and touch. So like you should be having a unit right there that should be looking to priority assets, vital link, turn one, guaranteed no matter what. Because you have to be able to come up here and do this. So what do we do on the Purge the Foe side? So on the Purge side, you could say, hey, I'm going to look to deny, one or two of the actions. But as Lane just mapped out, they have multiple ways to get back in this game and not lose out on primary overall. That's why priority is such a well taken disposition because it does have such a low floor point scoring into so many matchups, into take and hold, into purge, into recon. Like it can do those things, it can score consistently, and that's why people like taking it because at the competitive level, you want to take something with the least amount of variance to help you in your games. So, what does that mean we need to do on a purge side? Well, believe it or not, just like every other, but this one specifically, you need to be able to all in your opponent. Like, you need to be able to wipe off enough off the board that they can't deal with you and also score points. And it has to be done early enough that the vital link actions haven't stacked up, that you have denied something somewhere. Now, there's different ways we could do that, right? Like, yes, could I infiltrate with a unit right on the backside of this wall and say, okay, I'm going to put enough OC on here that you do have to come kill me, but you have to kill me with something real. Maybe I'm looking at maybe it's a combat army that has priority assets, which is obviously very common. And I'm just going to string out my units here back behind this wall and say, well, you're going to have to come out and kill this with something real. And if you do, all that means is you're giving me my kill and I'm denying the priority assets. So like as a priority assets player, it's not enough to just put one unit here because if I'm deploying properly and I see you only have one unit staged to do the vital link turn one, I'm going to do things to try to stop you. I'm going to infiltrate. I'm going to scout. I'm going to look to put things on that center objective and say, no, I've already counted it up. You have 5 OC with that 5-man unit. I have 6 here. I have whatever, or I have 5. So we're the same. And you won't be able to do the vital link action without actually coming out to kill me. So like those are the intricacies that you need to have to play into priority assets because at the end of the day, I believe genuinely that you're just looking for a turn to like really hammer it home because that's the purge way.
Yeah, for sure. And trash is so important in the priority asset players plan that like if you ever get the chance, right? It might not feel great, right? You might have an asset that you're just like, man, this really can just do some real damage to key units. But when we're looking at the scoreboard, and if you notice that you have the opportunity, maybe they clump up a little too much. If you can knock out like 3 pieces that are just there to be trash, little action pieces from a priority assets player with one unit, I'd take that trade like every single time in this matchup because that's it, it just hurts their economy so bad for them to be able to do that action because it's just so important having things like Phil was saying, right? If they kind of hang out their infiltrator unit early and you can just be like, well, I'm gonna go pick that up, like worth it every single time. If you can trade your infiltrator for theirs so they have to bring out their next little piece to do the action, that's just it's so good. Looking at one of the other parts of the mission is that second battle rounds onward for Purge, right? More enemy units were destroyed this turn than friendly units in the previous, right? This is another one of those things that I think a lot of players kind of like just kind of forget, especially as the priority assets player. You really can kind of pay attention to this, be like, well, what do they actually have? Right? Can I go kill some of their big things and get a high kill, or maybe some of the purge players trash if they have some? Go rack that score up in a turn and be like, all right, well, I killed a bunch, but I kind of left mostly only tougher hammer units that you maybe can't interact with as much as you would like to, right? And so I think that's another really important thing. And I think that's a thing for purge players too, is even though it's their own mission, they forget a lot of the times that they kind of need to play like a ramp up game a little bit. Like they want to make sure that they're bringing out their opponent for some reason, right? They need to get an asset out there because they need to be able to kill things in their own turn, and you've got to be able to ramp that game up. As Phil was saying, right? You want to hit them like a truck, or eventually, right? You want to all in your opponent, and that does feel really good, right? You should get more kills then, but if you didn't really interact with your opponent the first 3 rounds of the game, and they've already got so many tokens up on the center objective, right? They're minimum 3 if they never do the action again on that middle primary. Like, it's so hard for you to actually come back in the score if you don't actually get kill more again right
Yeah.
after that. Like, it feels kind of tedious, but like, you need to be kind of tracking of like, where are we going to be on kills as this game progresses.
Yeah, and a good priority assets player will keep track of those throughout. So, just a recommendation for you out there that love tools and love dice. I use big dice. So when I'm counting up tallies, whether I'm on the priority asset side or the purge side, I'm keeping track of those kills so I have something visual to remind me throughout the turn of what is actually like taking place that turn, because it is very easy to forget about something that took place in a prior turn, and like all it takes is for one kill, like, oh shit, I had no reason to push that unit out. Not only did I give up a kill, but I also gave up kill more. So it's like it's pretty tough to come to that conclusion at the end of the turn when your opponent is calculating points and being like, yeah, I just gave up 4 points in a matchup that I shouldn't, or I didn't need to.
Yeah. Yep. I think there's a lot to be said about that. And I think looking at this map, I guess this is, we've talked a little bit, right? We're looking for places we can infiltrate, but I think this is another map. We've talked a little bit about this before for our other video. Anytime you're playing Dawn of War, you should ask yourself, should I turn this board? Right? Would I rather be trying to play a short edge map instead of the long edge deployment that I was given? Right? And if your army actually has either the speed or the rapid ingress threats that you can just overload your opponent's natural and turn the board, that can be so valuable. Especially, I feel like in the purge player's favor, it's still handy for priority assets because of, we've talked about, it's just so easy. That 6-inch move forward, you can be on that center objective, right? But if you as the purge player can turn the board early, you can really stage behind that center objective and not be threatened nearly as much. And so I think that's one of those things. As you look at the matchup, can you just put enough pressure on that side of the board? And then it really allows you, between still having that nice L of your own in your deployment zone and, taking their natural and owning that side of the board, you can really threaten the center more effectively for specific armies.
Yeah, so like for example, this line here, we talked about it previously in a lot of different ones, but I will reiterate it here because it's really important. It's very easy for me to just say, well, how far does this go? This is 7.3. Won't get too in depth with it, but like another 6/10 of an inch. So there's a pocket right here that our opponent very easily could not be able to screen out without actually bringing a model off the terrain. So it's very hard to screen this out. And that's what I found every time I've played this matchup from the Purge player's side. It's like, I need something that's going to get into this pocket and kill whatever's on my opponent's home. Like, I have to be able to do that because it means that I can swing the game in a meaningful way. It means that I can turn this off and then actually control more objectives than my opponent, which is like one of the ways that I have to do to check the score. So I have to get on your home in a meaningful way because it is hard to get after the center. It is hard to stop the vital lane priority, especially into good players, right? They're going to put something out there that's, we talked about it before that. Legions of Excessless for the Beast of Nurgle. Beast of Nurgle is not something people want to actually go into because it's just, it's going to scan you one time, it'll regen all its wounds, and then you're just standing there like, well, I just committed into this thing. I didn't deny it. Vital Link action will still happen. Maybe I denied them controlling the center for their max primary, and then here we are. Like, and Beast of Nurgle are like 2 or 3 OCs, so like, even your like dumb little scouting pieces may not even get it done if you can't get enough on there. So like, yes, these are the angles you're attacking. That's why Dawn of War is such a problem. Is like I can actually attack these angles with a lot of my armies, whether it be Custodes, whether it be Death Guard, whether it be Death Watch, just general Space Marines like Blood Angels. You give them a pocket like this to go after their home, they're rapid ingressing Stain Guard right there. And either you put back significant assets to stop this happen in the shooting phase, or they're just going to clean up your home. And you're going to lose out on primary, and Purge is going to do what Purge does, which is kill every.
Legitimately, these Dawn of War maps is just, probably 70% of the reason I just auto include Gaunt's Ghosts in every single one of my guards list, because they, until at least turn 3, they just have to sit in the open to prevent Purge players or anybody else from being able to just either walk in or rapid ingress off that board edge, because it is just so important. Yeah, it's and on the flip side too, like I just leave off Adorn. Like it's these matchups and these maps that are so wide. If you do not have good rapid ingress or just come in off the board and shoot the shit out of something threats, it is so much harder to play. In my opinion, it makes the game so much easier if you can just keep things in reserve and play a flexible game plan, because until your opponent really commits, it just feels bad. You're just kind of stuck where you're at. The staging areas for a lot of bigger tanks aren't actually great on these maps. They're very wide. It's not hard to tag in to see certain angles, and so it's something you have to keep in mind for sure. Yeah, let's see. Any other thoughts about this map before we move on to layout B?
Yeah, so we've said it in other videos, but we've made it try to make the focus effort of repeating ourselves. That way, if you're only going to watch this video, like we're going to give you tips and tricks for this matchup. This alley now is the place where a lot of units are going to hide and survive. Right? Like whether it be a reactive move unit, and just being here in this pocket means that you're going to be in a position that your opponent has to actually get close to you, and then you reactive move back 6, and now you're suddenly like not only in a piece of terrain, so you're going to have hidden, like, or you could be, there's situations where you could be all the way behind, right? So I'm pre-measuring all of this to see which way my reactive move can go, but there's so many armies that have them. This channel has made a huge difference for you now, because if I'm not touching this side of the profile, you actually have to touch this to shoot through and see me here, or you have to poke yourself out here, which in a lot of matchups I think is really valuable for the Purge player. If I have good shooting assets that can rest in this lane and say, okay, you want to come out here and kill this piece of trash, preventing me from getting hold more, fine. But either I'm going to reactive move and I'm going to get back off the profile, which is awesome, or you're going to trade that for your good shooting asset, and I'm going to kill you there. It's just like the Purge player needs to constantly be thinking about how can I get my opponent to commit the most amount of assets, so every turn I have an opportunity to get kill more. Because if you don't have the opportunity to get kill more, you are going to fall behind a priority player. Lane already did the math. It is not good for the Purge player. They can very easily play the slow game and just like eke out a win. And at the end of the day, like they'll score 100, right? Because they're getting a 41 pretty much as a breeze, and they'll eventually score what they need to on the secondary side, especially if they're playing a very slow game with a good priority list.
Yeah. Yeah, and I do think that is one of the nice things, though, being a Purge player, right? You don't have to do as many actions. You aren't going to be losing as many units to get your own base scoring down. So if you're doing what you should be as a Purge player, right, you should knock them off of all objectives for a turn, if not two, right? We say it's not hard to get 41 for a priority assets player. They should not get 41 generally if you, the Purge player, are loading up the board. You're saying, all right, I wrap it in a thing, a good asset. I'm ready to come in. I'm going to hit you on the center objectives off your natural, and we're going to knock your scoring way down, and hopefully tie them up enough with melee if that's kind of your thing, or just good OC that's also just weighing on the center that they can't chew through themselves.
Yeah.
So we're definitely looking to do that, because despite saying, they can score 41 as long as you don't interact with them. So you gotta go get in there for sure. All right. Layout B.
Cool. Search and Destroy, another one that I'm very familiar with, just played a bunch of. Search and Destroy generally has always been the combat focused layout. Now, when Lane and I went through all the layouts and we broke all those down, we found that these actually are relatively balanced. There is good staging areas in these for both combat armies, shooting armies. But the real question is, as Purge player is like, okay, how do I get after the things I need to get after, which is how do I kill the unit that's doing Vital Link to force my opponent to do another? And then how do I like wipe my opponent off the board? So I'll just show you right now, because it's can be it's a little disheartening at first. Your priority opponent comes out here and touches this objective with a infantry unit, beast or swarm. Okay, well now they're gonna have hidden and go to ground. They're gonna come out here, they're gonna do the action. How do you get to this guy? Because all of this space is relatively dangerous. There is not going to be a clear line of sight. You're going to have to come down one of these angles, or you're going to have to charge it. Now, I'll just show you, for example, let's say my opponent had a pretty decent heroic intervention unit right here. and this is the unit that's doing vitally. And they say, okay, you want to come charge this? Because I haven't given you realistic shooting threats, like shooting ways to get into it. Great. I have this great heroic intervention unit and I can get after it. So that means that our opponent, if they're putting a priority on this layout like this, it can be very, very difficult because what that's going to turn into is they're going to flip and control the center possibly, which means they're going to score 8 primary at the beginning of the turn, which is, as Lane said, one of the 2 that they need to do to score the 41 minimum, like period dot. Like look at the 45 easy if they manage to set this up twice. So you have a choice to make. Do I commit into something like this and try to kill it and be like, okay, well, I have to kill this thing because I can't let you do this twice. I can't let you heroic into me and maintain the vital length without me interacting with you at all. And that's kind of like the conclusion you should come to when you're realizing this is like sometimes you may have to downtrade as the purge player because you have to force your opponent to start the game. Because if you're like, well, I don't want to interact with that because they're not heroic me and do all this stuff. It's like, you're right. You don't want them to heroic you, but on the flip side, you don't have a choice. Like you have to kill that thing. Whatever it is, it has to die. And you have to do it because you can't let your opponent stage like this, because as we said, priority will then just win the game because they will outscore you. You cannot play a slow game. You need to find the all-ins, whether it be your opponent giving you an all-in or taking it. But we can't get to the all-in step if they're able to just continually rack up these points.
Yeah, for sure. And it is going to vary based off, maybe your opponent has that, maybe they don't. Maybe in certain matchups, because of the tools you have accessible, you can't really get there, right? But just make sure you're putting good infantry that is going to require them to get within 15, right, on the edge of that terrain piece, right? Make sure that if they're hidden behind that wall, you're touching the other tip so that you out OC them, right? They're still going to have to knock you off or at least commit more resources in OC to be able to do their action again, right? And especially, I would say that you still want to do this kind of as a shooting player in Purge, but as the melee players, I think you just kind of have to do very specific things to kind of help yourself be successful. One of those is if priorities in the bottom left, purge is in the top right. We need to go down and secure our natural in the bottom right of the board because that is a very good staging area. That ruin that goes across the top left of our natural is actually going to give us something that we can load our units into fairly safely,
Yeah.
to be able to go and apply pressure, right? So we want to make sure we can kind of swing down, secure that one to a certain extent. If they want to fight us over it, great. Give us those kills as a purge player. We want you committing resources away from the center if we can. So that does feel great. And once you have secured it, it makes it just so much easier to go and actually keep units moving forward and striking deeper into their lines. On the other side of the board, if your opponent isn't uber fast or maybe melee-ish themselves, if you have the speed to get to the top edge of the board and on the back side of that wall on their natural, that can be so annoying for them to deal with. Because if they aren't smart and they don't keep resources off the board, that can just drive in on the left edge and say, oh cool, well I can see around that corner, right? You need to be aware of those things. If they don't have that, then you can just put them behind that wall and say, well, do you have anything that can actively come fight me over here? And then, as always, you need rapid ingress threats. Whether you're dropping them off of an angle behind one of the center ruins or behind one of the naturals, you have to have some rapid ingresses. Search and destroy is probably even more important than Dawn of War. But if it's not one, it's the other. These two maps are so pivotal for having good reserve units.
If I'm the purge player, you should expect to see both of these layouts multiple times, including layout C. Like should be your bread and butter. Search and destroy. I'm sorry to say, Dawn of War, and then what we're about to reveal is the third. Lane, there's some really interesting staging points. These L's inside our deployment zone are very nice because it means that it's very easy for us to play this board edge and be relatively safe. Right? It's very hard for our opponent to actually come out and come down and shoot these things. And obviously, always pre-measure, always make sure. But you could pack a lot of stuff here in this bottom L, and you can pack a lot of things in this top L. And these are great staging points. When we talked about, what this layout does well, combat armies should love to see this because I could very easily get inside this pocket. And as we talked about in the previous layout, it's very easy for me to actually live within this gap and make sure that I'm not touching either side, and then I'm hidden all the way through, or sorry, I have line of sight blocking all the way through. And it's really, really nice. These staging expansions also very interesting because I have another staging rune right behind my natural that I can load units into and be prepared to go after and flip back. Because this is a tougher layout to flip. We saw very easy Dawn of War. It's very easy to flip the table. It is a little bit harder to do here, especially with an army that's not as mobile. So, like, yes, mobile armies, if you have good infiltrate, you have good scout, all of those things, take advantage of a search and destroy layout because it means that I can get after these pockets because the same rule applies of these lines are pretty crazy, right? And if our opponent doesn't put something out here in this pocket, deny, I can very easily drop back here and kill anything that's on that objective easily. So my opponent almost has to overcommit. That's why, Lane was talking about Gaunt's Ghosts. If you're talking about infiltrators, if you're talking about even just a unit of like flayed ones or something. You have to make sure that your opponent can't get behind you because if they can pincer this objective, that becomes where I'm going to look to flip the board and get after your home. And as the Purge player, I have to do it somewhere. I have to wipe you off. I have to make sure that you don't control anything. And it means that maybe sometimes I have to downtrade, but it is what it is.
Yeah. And, talking about the priority assets player, right? I think this is one of the best maps for actually having a solid chance at holding the center because the spot we talked about where you can do the action is still just so hard to deal with, right? If, maybe you're playing some Dark Angels. If you can put some Deathwing Knights with Ancient to be high OC strung along that back edge of that middle objective for you with good heroic threats, right? Like it's going to be so hard for them to really crack into that. You have high OC. It feels horrible to trade down into as a
Mm.
Purge player, right? Like just being like, it's got good OC, it's hard to kill, and there's another one right behind it. So come deal with it, right? Like it's a straightforward game plan. I do it with Bulgrin. If I see this map, you say, I'm going to get 8 points unless you either put good OC, which is finally, if it's a high OC unit, it's probably battle line. That means it's probably a good target I could actually go trade my first unit of Bulgrin into while staging
Yeah.
another one right behind it, right?
Yep.
Feels great. And then we're also looking to just make sure we can't focus too much on the center. It's very, very unlikely you're ever going to hold both center objectives. You got to be a really tough Castle army to even think about doing that. Probably not going to happen. But if you focus too hard on the center, you're going to get flanked. Do not let the Purge army flank you. You need to choose one of these take and hold, these expansions, and make it your own. In general, for slower armies, I personally think, despite all odds, it can be easier to actually still just take the one that would technically generally be considered your opponent's just because we're putting so many resources right there in the center. So if we're the blue player, right, we're taking both top objectives and we're going to take the top central objective, right? It's a little bit more spread out, but our home isn't generally going to be that threatened, but you can just put so many resources in such a close space that it makes it a lot easier to hold and then crack back on those fights when the Purge player inevitably has to come into your army. So I think that's very, very important. Can't stress it enough. Still want rapid ingresses. I think as a priority assets player, you get so much benefit out of having a good counterpunch unit. If you can, if you notice your opponent is really, really staging, having a rapid ingress of your own to go fight them before they get to come into your lines and either kill that and then have a problem for them to deal with away from you, or just have made a good trade, tons of value in that scenario.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think we've talked this one to fruition. This is a good layout. I like it a lot. I like Surge. It gives you a lot of interplay. There's great staging points. Yeah, I'm very pleased with this. Just be cognizant of where the dense terrain is because
Always.
yeah, it's what you got to do. All right, Lane. Any final thoughts before we move on to C?
No, I mean, you did mention a little bit before. This is balance. We've talked a lot about the melee side of things. It should be pretty obvious where your tanks are going. They're going behind the small L's and stuff. If you do have the speed and can get across, I do think taking the hammer and anvil, direction of the board and flipping, making sure you flip the board the other way can be very, very handy. But just being able to drive over that the 10 by 2 and then the 6 by 2, being able to drive over that and touch either central objective is so gross. No matter which way you turn the board, if you do not have your big fuck you guns in that spot, I don't know what you're doing because you can see anything from that position.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
But yes,
it's a great staging point, right? But it does force you to come up closer, so you just got to keep that in mind, whether you're the purge or priority player. So, yeah, it's a good layout. We like it. We like search and destroy.
hammer and anvil, baby.
OG traditional 40k.
Yeah, this one is like, I don't know. I haven't had to play on it, but I when we looked at these originally, I really just thought it's so clunky to move with tanks. To actually get into like short medium range can be really really annoying. Thank God pivots don't cost anything. But on that, yeah, for the red player, you kind of are starting there, but between where that tall 6x2 is and then your home ruin, like you kind of just once you put something down, it's kind of just committed to those sides. And unlike the last map where you could just easily drive up and touch the center and see anything, these are just far like if it's because of the terrain and less about the layout for once, but you have to keep shooting assets off the board on this one
Yeah.
because you're never going to be able to safely drive up to threaten that natural across the bottom of the board when you could easily like you're going to have to rapid. You have to make sure nothing's there. And if they do put something out there to threaten you, you go, oh, cool. Well, now I just drive in on my own turn and I shoot the shit out of you anyway. Because the way they do the 6x4s and then the 6x2 ruins to where you lose 2 inches of it, it's really fucking annoying. And so you can't hide most of these big tanks. Like you really can't effectively hide a Repex. You definitively can't hide a Dorn in that pocket without them being like, oh, so I just drive to the edge of the board right behind my natural, and I definitively can draw a line to the ass of your tank. Yeah, yeah, you can.
Right. Like that is not a safe place to be. Yeah,
Especially if they're melee, they'll also just have secured their natural and run you the fuck over and come touch you. So
correct, because all the melee assets are going to be in this pocket right here. They're going to have 12-inch go to ground, and they're just going to say, okay, well, you just put out like the asset that you want to kill me with, but that's only 10 inches. So even just a basic 6-inch move and then a 5-inch charge means I'm going to get into you, which is pretty devastating for a unit that like that has not activated yet, that hasn't gotten its value yet. And value doesn't necessarily always mean killing. Lane and I have talked to that till we're blue in the face. Like, there is positional value for losing something versus like the actual points cost of whatever you killed and then in return what it got you. So like yeah, there's value in all of those things, but this layout, especially rapid ingress, the drastic difference being able to rapid or threaten a rapid here to pick up whatever's in this terrain is drastically different than trying to start behind this wall and then let's say your just basic move of let's say it's 12 inches, that doesn't even get you there. And that's like obviously without a pivot, right? But a pivot doesn't do anything realistically for us here. We have to roll in advance. We might not get it. We need actual distance here. Like, and even then, as we said, that's not the greatest spot. Now, what does that mean for us in terms of our list building? If we know that layout C is going to be one of our options and we're the purge player, what does that mean I actually need to have? Well, that means that I need to actually have some decent infiltrator. We talked about it in search. We talked about it in the other deployments. Is like I actually need something that's going to come out here and is reasonable. I need good rapid ingress stats that are going to come out and wipe things off this objective. And I actually probably should have deep strike because I shouldn't be able to. Like, yes, this is nice. And if I'm threatening something on both sides of the board, there's a lot of stuff I could take advantage of, right? I can get after the centers. I can get after the expansion, and both of those things are fantastic. And obviously, you have all of this open space back here, which is honestly very difficult to screen out. That is not easy. Like you would have to leave dedicated assets back here to cover a lot of this space, which means that if I have good deep strike and rapid ingress threats, I can take this backspace and be, pretty aggressive with it. I can go after my opponent's natural. I could very easily go after my opponent's natural and their home, which is not what my opponent wants to like see if they're talking about trading with me. Like I don't want a 2-for-1 special. I don't want to be able to drop a unit here and then also get after like my opponent's home. So it's not good. It's this backspace, you have to have come up with a pretty good plan. There we go. Uh, you have to come up with a pretty good plan to cover all of this space. Because if I can deep strike or rapid ingress behind you, whether it be a strat reserve unit or with deep strike, this is really, 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 really nice. But the same problem applies for priority assets. Is hey, priority assets player, how are you going to get out to here and do the action turn one? Are you going to start with a guy right here touching this piece of terrain? Great. You're within 6 inches. That means you can come out and do the action. But if you notice the drastic difference between layout C and layout B, if I have a 6-inch base movement unit, I can't actually get back behind here with almost everything and do the action. This is drastically less safe than the units we just saw on layout B. Like, if I can't get back here, that is tough. That is not good. It's the same thing over here. If I was to infiltrate a unit behind this wall, well, 6 inches, I might be able to get one guy there. But you know where the rest of the guys are? They're in freaking no man's land. They're not touching anything. They would have to touch this sidewall. And there's a very real world where one of them won't be obscured by dense terrain, so it's not going to get to go to ground. So you have to really, really map this out. Strongly recommend getting on TTS. Use this website that we use often. It's called Rapid Ingress, and just map it out. Map it out. Do all your measurements in, and then when you get to the board, double check. Verify that what you used on here is actually what's on the board, and then communicate with your opponent properly. Because this is one of those layouts that priority assets players, you kind of got to stretch. It is not free like we saw in Search and Destroy or Dawn of War. Those were a lot easier and a lot safer to get to. This one is not nearly as such.
Yeah, it just isn't. As Phil was saying earlier, right? We're going to have to use some units to take space and get value in those ways. Playing this map, what I really feel like in terms of like from a guard perspective, right? We already talked about how ass that bottom of the board is for a shooting lane, right? We're gonna bring something in off the board edge, whether it's a rapid or whether it is just in our own movement phase. In general, though, I think this board favors Purge in the fact that it's very accessible to get to the middle regardless. So you really, really need to have a kind of a front to back play style, right? You're going to play all the way through your opponent's army. You can do some flanking stuff and try to do that if they give you openings. But in general, when it comes to just setting your line, right? We're going to keep taking space with our priority assets army, and we're going to try to secure part of the board. That spot that Phil was talking about, right? If you can use that spot, it's very, very valuable. But I think the meat and potatoes of your army benefit the most from if you're the red player taking the top of the board, right? Your natural is actually not that hard to secure, and you can use it yourself to keep staging, right? If you can keep pushing and then eventually use the other side, the top side of that top center objective to kind of hold there while also still having units that can come out of your home and stuff, they can keep pushing up the board. Like you really can kind of turn the board enough to make it more consistent in being able to go and do that. You need to be able to take space, right? You need to have something that can threaten and go run and fight the things, or at least tie up the things that are behind that L of your opponents that are on the top side of the board there. That is just it again, right? If you can't stage stuff in that bottom L, they probably can't stage stuff too safely in the top, right? And so making sure we try to take advantage of that is always useful. And then I guess I should say too, we talked about where not to put your tanks. Let's actually talk about where to put your tanks and monsters behind your natural. That's the other great reason of why we want to be able to really secure this, right? It allows us to have much more of a threat. If anything touches either center objective, we easily can go peek that, right? We can now see so much of that board because it's actually not that hard to go out, get up there, and go take that space. The other place we can be is on our home behind that big L, and then just ready to scoot over, like on the terrain piece even. That's a very, very long, tall ruin that you can hide behind. And so you can, especially with pivot, if you are behind it, you can move up, you can come out, and you can get the same lines of sight, right? If our stuff is starting on the board, these are the two best spots, in my opinion, to start things. You might, for staging reasons, actually, just to keep your opponent quote unquote honest, start to the bottom of that natural, even though you know you're not going to advance around that edge because it's just a trap and it's ass. You want that L on your home to be a staging area for all of your infantry that need to run up and get in that pocket behind that other center objective, right? So that's where I would say it's probably the best to start your tanks. Obviously, you're probably not going to be able to fit behind your natural immediately. You're going to have to start behind that 10-inch ruin, but that's fine, right? Again, we need our infantry up there to go take that space initially, right? But yeah, I think that's a pretty important thing. We haven't talked too much about infiltrators. It's going to be fairly apparent, right? If your priority, especially being right there to go and stand on the center in those spots, is just always very valuable, very good. The other thing you can do, depending on what your opponent has, is maybe you can put yourself in a spot where you can go deny their natural for a turn. Really, just put them behind. The problem with that is it's very hard to punish that spot if you can't get your resources staged, right? If you have infantry, you can really pressure their natural. If you have monsters and vehicles, it can be very, very difficult to feel like you can stage your next waves effectively.
Yeah, this area is very dangerous. It is very open. You got to make sure you're, if we're gonna use this as a staging point, right? If we're gonna go after, our opponent's natural, not only do I need to come out here with whatever I use to flip it, but I need to make sure that I'm pushing things far enough out that my opponent's rapid ingress cannot come in and punish that unit that's staged there. I also got to make sure they can't just normal deep strike or normal strat reserve and walk in from the board edge and then blast the units and then that's in there, right? Because if they're able to clean this up, whether it be a Leonin aggression, I keep calling it that, but it's like the super heroic. If I can super heroic into it, yes, maybe you flipped it, maybe you got the unit out or whatever, and this unit is now dead. Like now, the same problem still is there. Is how are you going to prevent them from getting inside this pocket with shooting or with combat? So you need to be very careful with, hey, if you're going to come up here and screen and you want to use this as a staging point, that's fine, but you have to do it with something meaningful. They have to be able to survive, and they have to make like you may only have one opportunity to do this depending on your year list build and kind of what you got going on. So it is doable, but you have to have a structured, tailored list to actually do it.
Yep, I think this is honestly, yeah, the hardest board to play on of any of them because it's just so very crammed. It's all really really close together. Those home objectives are really far forward. The naturals and both central objectives are just really not far to get to them. Right? If we were to measure from the corner of each expansion to each other, like it's maybe 22 inches is my guess, Phil. I don't know if you can give us a quick measurement, but it's
What?
not far
Say that
from
again.
expansion to expansion. I don't think it's far. Like I don't even know if it's 20 inches from.
18.45.
Yeah, it is so close to get from one to the other. If you have a jetpack unit that has advance in charge, you can go from one expansion to the other if there's nothing in your way and you don't have to take to the skies. It's crazy. Yeah, absolutely insane. So again, that's part of why taking these naturals and really securing them does feel very, very important. And it can be really hard to initially kind of hold from that back edge because that's a very thin ruin. That's only about 3 inches wide on the back edge of that L that is, favorable for your gone to ground hiding, but you can only fit like three big, maybe four small, five small models. So your OC can't really be that high generally without either being battle line or some OC manipulation. So
It's an interesting map. It's an interesting layout. I would still prefer to play on this one out of the three times versus just playing Dawn of War over and over again because I do think this provides a few problems that both the priority and the purge player have to deal with, which I prefer.
yeah. Yeah, it's interesting to say the least. Personally, if you think you're going to be playing, if somebody for some reason you have a TO that says we're playing nothing but layout C, right? Throw a freaking big knight with tons of shooting in your list so it can walk over that pain in the ass little wall that's too tall for your other tanks. Take something that can step over. Take a defiler, right? It's just required on these. It's not required. It just helps. It solves that problem, right?
It does.
Like if I had an asset that could shoot that hard and just step over these tall walls to finally not be annoyed by that staging point being ass, I 100% would be looking at it if I know I'm probably going to be playing on this layout more often than not. Like if I have a defiler, it goes right there every single time because it can do what my other assets like it can't.
Yeah, it's pretty good. Fires are pretty good. Who would have thought?
Who would have thought?
Still good.
Okay. All right. Well, any final thoughts on Purge the Foe versus priority assets? I feel like we got a good coverage. We don't want to be repeating ourselves too much. We know these layouts can be fairly similar from video to video, but we still
Yeah.
want to make sure we talk about it because if you maybe only saw this one but didn't see another, we want to make sure you hear it.
Yeah, I think as both players, as the purge player, I'll reiterate what I said in the beginning is, hey, we need a knockout punch. We need to KO our opponent because we cannot like you cannot play the slow game into priority assets. They will win because if they can strangle the amount of units they give out, they will just score primary and they don't need to interact with you in a real way. So in your list building, you need to have things that will draw your opponent out. And to draw your opponent out, maybe that's good OC, right? That stops them from controlling the center. Maybe that's a reactive move unit. Maybe that's a super, super durable unit, right? That is just going to survive in some of these situations. But you have to have your opponent that you have to force them to interact in a real way. And sometimes that means down trading, and that's okay. So as the Purge player, we're looking for that KO punch. As the priority player, yes, in this matchup, we could play it very, very slow. You should be scoring, like, you could very easily score high 90s, hundreds every time. Playing that slow kind of round, you have to be able to prevent and control tempo to prevent your opponent from all-inning you. And that means like pushing out your screens even further and making the trades not valuable, and to force your opponent into a position where they actually have to give up something meaningful. And then you can use your potentially more effective units that you have a little bit wider to go into multiple things across the board. So yeah, both those things very, very valuable. It's an interesting matchup. Priority is probably preferred in the majority of these because they can slow the game down. Purge is, they're in the driver's seat and you got to be able to go after it.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's very, very important for the Purge player to understand that, tempo is their ally. If they can just make the game too fast and too deadly for the priority player to keep up on the scoring side, if they can't afford to do those actions, it means so much. And I even just making sure in positioning, right? When we're looking at you went and fought something, make sure you are using your consolidates wisely to where you're not even like, because of engagement range being 2 inches, they can't step on the objective, right? It's the little things like that that can make such a big difference. Sure, they can shoot you off of it, but if their piece that they have lined up to go stand on the objective can't actually legally stand there, right? You're affecting the game, right? So that's why, as Phil was saying, it's worth it to go trade down, go kill that little action piece, and then just make sure on your consolidate that you position yourself correctly. They can't do their next one without either doing it somewhere else or with a different unit, something that's just more valuable, because setting them back, especially early as the Purge player, means so much in terms of the points they are going to score.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. All right, Lane, I think we killed it. I think this is another one in the books. People have liked the last, whatever, two or three that we've done so far. This is another one. Hopefully, you've learned something. If you have, go ahead and hit us up in the comments. Hit us up in the Discord. We love chatting about 40K. And we love hearing about all the things that you have enjoyed about 11th edition so far, because it is definitely, definitely a unique edition and has provided some very interesting list building and, you know, decision making points that I think we didn't have in 10th edition, and I definitely appreciate that.
Yeah. I think it's a lot more micro play that you have to get accustomed to within your own missions on a bunch of macro play boards that are all fairly similar across the missions. So I think that's definitely something we're going to keep diving into. Hope to see you back for the next one. Like and comment if you haven't already. And as always, do not forget that victory isn't given, it is forged, and it's forged right here at Mastercrafted. We will see you all next time.
See you guys.